Thank you very much for joining us today at our event, The Truth from the People of Iran, which is being held as a response to the Council on Foreign Relations forum earlier this morning, about an hour ago, with Javad Zarif, the Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic in Iran. Despite our requests that they cancel their panel in light of the killing of Navid Afkari, or modify it to in some way involve the voices of the Iranian people or those oppressed by the regime, the Council on Foreign Relations regrettably refused to do so. We are thankful to all of you for attending in the Zoom, to the many more of you who are watching on multiple live platforms. We're extremely thankful. I would like to thank those of us who are with us today, our speakers who we'll get to momentarily. But first, we'll begin with a video about Navid Afkari.
درود مردم شریف ایران. نوید افکاری هستم. آخرین تیرمونم که از مجاری قانونی جمهوری اسلامی ایران زدیم اثری نداشت و اعاده دادرسیمونم رد کرد. این یعنی بعد از 2 سال خون دیگر خوردن تکلیفم به قوه قضاییه معلوم شد و قرار من به حکم خالی از شرافت و عدالت قضات پرونده اعدام بشم. نه دادگاهی صدای ما رو شنید، نه اصلا قاضی و مسئول دادخواهی وجود داشت که بخواد به حرفمون گوش بده. اگرم تا الان سکوت کرده بودیم فقط به امید اجرای عدالت بود و بس. ولی از این لحظه به بعد من و خانواده‌ام نیاز به کمک داریم. روی صحبت من فقط با ایران نیست. مخاطب من هر آدمی که دم از انسانیت میزنه و ذره‌ای از شرافت توی وجودش هست. سکوت شما یعنی حمایت از ظلم و ظالم، یعنی حمایت از اعدام شدن یک بیگناه، یعنی گام به گام نزدیکتر شدن من به چوبه اعدام. شنیده بودم سر بیگناه پای دار میره ولی بالای دار نمیره. ولی دروغه. داریم میبینیم که همش دروغه. به حکم دستگاه قضایی جمهوری اسلامی ایران که بیگناه به اسم نوید افکاری داره هر لحظه به تمام کار نزدیکتر میشه. اگه صداشون هم بکنن، اگه تمام به زندگی شربش میدن و بازم عذاب میکنن. حالا من از هر انسان آزاده و حق طلب با هر عقیده و مسلکی که هستن میخوام صدای من و خانواده‌ام باشه. چون شرافت انسانی با حمایت از حق و عدالت معنایی نداره. مردم، من به حکم عقل و انسانیت موظف به حفاظت از جان خودم هستم و از مدارک و مستندات هر آنچه که گواه بیگناهی من موجوده. همه مدارکی که جمع کردیم و مطالبی که دارم میگم برای اینه که اگر من اعدام شدم همه بدونن قرن 21 با این همه هزینه و سازوکارهای حقوق بشری سازمان ملل و شورای امنیت و غیره یک انسان بیگناه در حالی که با تمام توانش تلاش کرده تا صداش بشنون اعدام شد. بدونید که آگاه باشید اگر من بیگناه اعدام شدم عقل منطق حکم میکنه که این اولین قربانی بی‌عدالتی بیدادگاه به اصطلاح عدالت محور نبوده.
یه پسر خیلی انسان خیلی خوبی که همه جونم و همه کسم نویده، همه جونم نویده، همه عمرم نویده. یه ورزشکار انسان به تمام معنا که فقط ورزش میکرد، کارگری میکرد که حتی حاضر نبود که ما این شلواری هم پایی بکنیم. خدا میدونه خودش کارگری میکرد که حتی ما به ما پیشانه ما شلوار پایی بکنیم. خودش در میاد کار میکرد، ورزش میکرد، همراه برادرش هم میرفت یا کسی دیگه مزد میگرفت کارگری میکرد. نویدم همینجور، حبیبم با وحید فقرا کمک میکرد، دست کار خیر داشت. ست انسان شهید، واقعا ست انسان شهید که من به بیگناهیشون ایمان دارم، که اینا آزارشون هم به یه مورچه‌ای نمیرسه. خدا میدونه. یعنی یه انسانه بودن که وحید یه آدمی بود که نگویی نه اهلی هیچی کار خرابی نبود. که این حکم ظالمانه رو برای وحید و حبیب و نوید
توی کسی کاری نداشت.
Those were the videos that were shared virally over the past few weeks. And despite that, today Javad Zarif at the Council on Foreign Relations insisted on insulting Navid's memory, in spreading lies that he was involved in the killing of a police officer. And those lies, as Javad Zarif's lies have always been, went unchallenged. They went totally unchallenged. It's today, though, that the other side of the story gets to be told, and we are so thankful for those who are with us. I'll introduce briefly the folks we have on screen, and then we'll get to the remainder of the program. First, we have the immense pleasure of being joined by Ms. Fatemeh Sepehri, who is joining us today from Mashhad in Iran. She is, we'll introduce her further when it is her part of the program, but we'd like to extend a warm welcome to her. خانم سپهری خوش آمد میگیم به شما و مجددا از شما تشکر میکنیم بابت تشریف فرماییتون امروز. خیلی ازتون سپاسگزاریم. She thanked everyone. We have some technological problems. As you can see, she's with us in camera via Zoom, but she is on the phone via WhatsApp. So although Mr. Zarif and Rouhani and Khamenei and members of the Iranian regime have easy access to internet, for the people, clearly the same case does not apply. So we thank her, and we'll get to her shortly. We have Mr. Shaheen Milani, who is the executive director of the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center on. He is a longtime advocate for human rights for the Iranian people, and he has kindly offered today to translate for Ms. Sepehri. We thank him very much, and again, we'll introduce him in short time. We're going to begin today's program, though, with our third guest that you see on your screen, Mr. Bret Stephens. Mr. Stephens will not be unfamiliar to many of you. He is a leading thinker, a leading thought leader in the United States on the issues of foreign policy and domestic politics. He's the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, and for many years worked as an editor and columnist at the Wall Street Journal. And today, he has been for some time a columnist at the New York Times, and we're very thankful that he's with us today to discuss the importance of providing all sides the opportunity to discuss critical global issues. Mr. Stephens, thank you again, welcome, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, Cameron, thank you for the honor of inviting me to this forum, and I'd like to thank Marjan Greenblatt for thinking of me as a guest. I have been writing about Iran for many years, and so it's a pleasure to be talking with this group. The great Czech dissident novelist Milan Kundera once said that the struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. And I see it as my job as an op-ed columnist at the New York Times, not simply to report the news or to comment about the news, But my job, Cameron, is also to try as best as I can not to forget. So I do not forget Ziba Kazemi, the Canadian-Iranian journalist who was murdered in Evin prison in 2003. I do not forget Neda Aga Sultan, the protester murdered in the streets of Tehran in 2009. I do not forget Sattar Beheshti, the blogger murdered, executed by the regime in 2012. I do not forget Hashem Shabani, the poet executed by the regime in 2014. And I will not, certainly not after watching that devastating presentation of yours, ever forget Navid Afkari, murdered just a few days ago. Nor will I forget some of the people who have suffered so much from the regime and continue to suffer. And I want to point out in particular someone I've written about, Ali Ahmadinejad, who is now suffering for the crime, which is actually in honor of being the brother of Masih Ahmadinejad, who has done so much to bring the repression of the Iranian regime to light in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere in the West. I want to talk about some other aspects of journalism, including the question of platforms and deplatforming. 13 years ago, when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad came to the United States, I wrote a column arguing that he should not be given a platform by Columbia University. I have since, and I've done so publicly, come to the conclusion that in that sense, at least, I was mistaken. And I believe that we should not treat the leaders of this regime in Tehran the way they treat their own people by constantly trying to silence them. We prove our commitment to free speech by extending it to those not only those we oppose, but also those we have often excellent reasons to despise. But having said that, I also think that we should demand that hard and inconvenient questions and embarrassing questions be asked of people like Mr. Zarif, and when they are not satisfactorily answered, asked over and over again, so that these platforms that are extended to leaders of a tyrannical regime not serve merely as vehicles for regime propaganda, but rather serve as opportunities for genuine illumination as to the nature of the government that Mr. Zarif serves. I also believe that it is absolutely incumbent on all serious organizations, when they give platforms to leaders of absolutist authoritarian regimes, to make sure that dissidents get not just equal time, but more than equal time, to call attention to their plight, to speak when it's not possible to speak to the dissidents themselves, to their relatives, to their sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers and children. And I think we have to do this, especially as journalists, Cameron. We honor the profession of journalism, not just by doing our daily work ethically and intelligently. We also honor it by being honest with our readers about the conditions in which we conduct our journalism. And I should say that goes especially when we find ourselves reporting from authoritarian regimes, whether it is North Korea or Russia or Belarus, or most especially perhaps Iran today, and when we find that we are unable to report the full truth because of the censorship there that is either real or threatened. We should not create Potemkin villages for our audience to pretend that they are getting an unfiltered view of the nature of that regime. We should be absolutely honest with them that when we go to those places, we are unable to tell the full truth about what we're able to see, what we're not able to see, and in particular, who we are not able to speak with, because we are forbidden from doing so by the censors, the minders, the Secret Service, by our fears of being arrested, all of that. Above all, I think that we should honor the conditions of journalism by always speaking up for the right of journalists and for all people to speak freely, to report honestly, and to call it out when they are unable to do so. So we cannot be indifferent to the conditions in which we conduct our work. And when we conduct that work from tyrannical places, we have to let our readers know what the real nature of that regime is. We should not mistake, and I underscore this, we should not mistake access, quote unquote, for truth. The two are often very different things. And being able to score a big interview with a quote unquote leader is not the same thing as being truthful to our audience or ethical in our profession. And let me make one final point here, Cameron, which is that at least in the business that I'm in, which is opinion writing, we should demand that the United States always live up to its core purposes in the world, which is to champion freedom, to call out injustice, to expose lies, to oppose dictatorship, and to always serve as a beacon of hope and possibility for so many voiceless people around the world who, at least in ordinary times, look to the United States as a force for genuine good and genuine freedom in the world. And I will always advocate for that so long as I'm given a platform in which to do so. So let me just conclude by saying how deeply touched I am and moved to participate in a forum which is interested not in getting access to leading opinion makers or decision makers, but in offering an unvarnished view of the situation, of the repression, of the injustices which take place every day in Iran, and to do what we can, at least in the dimensions of thought and public opinion, to make sure that the future leaders of Iran, so many of whom are in jail today, be noticed, be protected, be helped, and that the current leaders of Iran wind up where they deserve to, or wind up where they so often deserve to be, which is in the very prisons in which they hold their future leaders captive. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Brett, thank you so much. Thank you for being one of the journalists, and on the issue of Iran, regrettably, there are a few, but who do not confuse access for truth. We are so thankful for the moral clarity with which you have written about the issue of Iran, with which you have so properly distinguished the very clear divide between the Iranian people and the regime occupying Iran. We couldn't truly be more thankful to you for your again, moral clarity in your comments today. It means an immense amount to all of us and to people in Iran as well, as I'm sure Ms. Seferi can later attest to. So we thank you again for joining us today and for your leadership.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to proceed to some comments from Sam Rajabi. Sam was a former member of the Iranian judo team, and he was forced into exile after he fell out with the Islamic Republic. So we will now play that video.
Hi, this is Sam Rajabi, Iranian former judo national team and Brazilian jiu-jitsu world champion. Obviously, in Iran, people are so mad and angry about murdering of Navid Afkari. At first, I thought they hanged him, but later on, the evidence showed he was killed under torture by Islamic regime in Iran. As an athlete right now, I think IOC, International Olympic Committee, and International Sports Federation, they should ban Islamic Republic of Iran Sports Federation from all international competition, especially Wrestling Federation at this point. Then I'm talking to United Nations right now. They have to show their support today if they really care about human rights. They have to make their decision. Are they really with oppressed people in Iran, or really they are with brutal government and Islamic regime in Iran? Thank you.
Sam's comment highlights for many the circumstances surrounding Navid's murder, to which we still do not have the answers. He referenced the fact that torture may have brought about his ultimate killing. I should note that facts are still very limited in this case. Many people who saw the body after he was killed saw rope or noose marks around the neck, indicating that he was indeed hung, he was indeed executed, but there was significant evidence of torture to Navid's person, both before and after he was found dead. We'll continue the program, and I want to highlight this point, that in the previous event at the CFR, Javad Zarif went on a litany of lies, as he often did, and he insulted the memory of Navid Afkari by insinuating that he was a criminal, by saying that the death penalty is something that happens all over the place. But the death penalty for people who went to a peaceful protest only happens in the Islamic Republic of Iran, only happens in Javad Zarif's regime. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from a former political prisoner, Ahmad Batebi. Javad Zarif, in one of these foreign audiences that he held, said that the Islamic Republic does not arrest people for their political views, does not arrest people for their beliefs. Ahmad Batebi is one of the thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who shows that Javad Zarif was lying through his teeth, was lying directly to the camera when he said that. Ahmad Batebi was one of the leaders and lead participants in the 1999 student movement. And although he doesn't allude to it much in the video that we're about to play, he faced immense torture after his arrest. Most of the things that happened to him aren't even appropriate to be said in this forum. He was physically abused for years using electrical wire on the genitals. He had his face forced into a toilet filled with feces. This is the regime that Javad Zarif represents, and that today was given a forum at the Council on Foreign Relations. Now we'll hear briefly from Mr. Ahmad Batebi.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me here. As you said, Navid and I, we had same situation in prison for some reason, capital punishment or forced for interview with Iranian state TV. We have some capacity inside Iran to protecting citizen rights or political prisoner rights. For example, all people can have own lawyers, and or they can have public court, and all people can be involved that, and media could report the court process for those people who are out of the courtroom. And sometimes some people like Mr. Javad Zarif, the Minister of Iranian regime propaganda, use these capacities to show good image from the regime to the world. But all we know that these capacities are on the paper, and no one can use that. The Iranian regime have own method and own authorities, on control on the people out of the rule concept. The majority of Iranian political prisoners have same destiny because the Iranian regime have a common scenario for all of those. A political prisoner like Navid Afkari in the prison have three choices. The first one, they have to accept the offer of Iranian regime to being a spy in their community. And the second one, they have to accept the scenario which Iranian intelligence service or IRGC wrote for them. And most of the time, this scenario is being spy for other countries, or being member of a political opposition group out of the country. And the third option, ignoring all these offers and scenarios and accepting the punishment by the government, which is most of the time capital punishment. They used an image of me, front page of Economist magazine, which was with a bloody T-shirt of students. And they said that you show a bad image by this picture, you show a bad image from us to the world. And the Islamic Republic in Iran is representative of God on the earth. And so when you show a bad image from our government, you directly show a bad image from the God to the people. So that's why by Islamic rules, you are muharib, which means somebody who fights with God, and your punishment is death. But I had this chance after a few years by international pressure and human rights groups activities. The Iranian regime changed my death punishment to 15 years prison, but unfortunately Navid didn't have this chance. Also, if you review 4 decades of Iranian regime story, you will see interview by force, by torture, is not a new technique. And this regime used that from the beginning, specifically after Islamic Revolution, which I call that Iranian nation suicide, which means the Iranian people are familiar with this type of interview. They know that what is the story behind this type of interviews. I'm going to refer you to a discussion between me and one of the prisoner guard when I was in the prison. They tortured me for forced interview, and they said that I asked them actually, people know that you torture me. If I go in front of the camera and repeat those things you mentioned me, they can understand that that's fake interview, and by force I'm telling them these things. His answer was so important, and the answer can clear the purpose of the government from these type of interviews. He said that we don't care. People believe those things you say in your interview. It's important for us the people know that we can bring you here in front of the camera, and we can put pressure on you to say those things we want. If you review the political prisoners' stories during past years, you will see a lot of political prisoners have been killed by government, had this situation. For example, they were member of the Iranian ethnic groups. They were member of the religion minority communities, or a lot of people from different communities. So the main strategy of this government is, scaring people to control them. We have freedom here, and all people are allowed to, have deal with this government or negotiate with them, invite them, or everything they want. But before doing that, as a person who born in Iran, raised in Iran, and know this regime, the concept of ideologies, and even the result of their activities, I strongly suggest them they review the Iranian regime constitution. They review IRGC's values or purposes or histories, which is not hidden. That's on the paper. They directly wrote these things on the paper, and definitely in internet you can find the different translation of that, including English. Review that and see what is their values. The first mission of IRGC as a biggest terrorist group in the world is exporting Islamic revolution values. When we talk, or when we say Islamic values, this is not necessarily Islamic values, because they are not, they are not Muslim. They don't have Islamic rule. They borrow some, sign and some values and some identity of Islam for their purposes, and they made own religion, which is not religion even. I call them criminal cults. When you say Islamic Republic of Iran, you do not talk about a regime which is committed to morality, to diplomacy, to politics. They use you to kill you. They use freedom against the freedom. They use democracy against the democracy. It's almost 4 decades they control Iran. What happened for this country during 4 decades?
Ahmad, as a result of his ongoing physical torture during his detainment, still has physical ramifications to this day. But we're so thankful that both he and Sam sent in those videos to give you more insight into just the type of regime that Javad Zarif represents so freely on the Western stage, on the global stage. Finally, perhaps the most compelling and important part of today's event. Again, we have the pleasure of being joined by Ms. Fatemeh Sepehri, and we'll begin with her in a moment. I want to just briefly introduce her, and I want to reiterate for all of those on the line, especially those who are not of an Iranian background, of whom there are many, and we thank you for joining us today. I would like to just reiterate how bold and how brave it is for Ms. Sepehri to be here with us today, from inside Iran, from Mashhad, Iran. Ms. Sepehri is one of the signatories of the 14-person letter, or as it's more eloquently called in Persian, Bayaniye 14 nafare. And this letter called for the immediate removal of Ali Khamenei and a complete removal of the Islamic Republic, which the letter referred to as a gender apartheid system, and the establishment of a secular democracy. Ms. Sepehri is one of the most outspoken activists still in the country. For that, she was arrested and spent some time in jail. Her dear brother is still in jail to this day for his activism. But she is truly a lioness, as we say in Persian, Shirzan, and we're so thankful for her presence today. And Mr. Shahin Milani has kindly offered and agreed to translate and interpret for us today. I will ask the questions in English. He will relay those in Persian to Ms. Sepehri. You'll hear her response in Persian, and then Mr. Milani will kindly translate to English. And I should say Shahin himself is a indefatigable defender of the Iranian people. As I mentioned earlier, he is the executive director of the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center in New Haven. He has his own personal story with this regime, which we actually talked about in a podcast episode with one another, and I'm so thankful for his leadership. Shahin, I will give the floor. Let me unmute you. And are you unmuted? There you are. Shahin, welcome.
Thank you very much.
If you just want to let Ms. Sepehri know that we will be starting, that'll be great.
خانم سپهری میخوام شروع کنیم قسمت سوال جواب با شما. من سوالا برای شما ترجمه میکنم، بعد جواب شما ترجمه
میکنم. خانم سپهری، قبل از اینکه سوال رو از شما مطرح میکنیم میکروفون میدیم دست شما اگر میخوای یه چیزی به دوستانمون و مخاطب که امروز هستن بفرمایید.
با سلام و درود به شما و مهمانانتون و بینندگان و شنوندگانی که من رو میبینن. ممنونم که منو به این برنامه دعوت کردید.
Hello to you and your viewers. Thank you very much for inviting me to this program.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sepehri, I'd like to first ask you, you, as I mentioned, were one of the signatories of the 14-person letter calling for an end to the Islamic Republic and the gender apartheid. What personally led you to make that bold stance and not believe in or not fall for the reformists that many refer to?
خانم سپهری، شما یکی از 14 نفری هستید که نامه‌ای بنوشتید که در اون خواستار پایان جمهوری اسلامی و پایان آپارتاید جنسیتی شده بود. چی شد که شما از اون ایده های اصلاح طلبان گذر کردید و اونا رو دیگه کنار گذاشتید؟
خاتمی در سال 76 که آمد گفت ظرفیت هایی در قانون اساسی جمهوری اسلامی هست که هنوز اجرایی نشده، که اگر اینها اجرایی بشه مشکلات جامعه حل میشه و جامعه مدنی مطرح کرد و وعده هایی به ملت داد و مجلس و دولت رو به دست گرفتن و به هیچ وعده‌ای که دادن عمل نکردن. بعد از این که وعده دادن و هیچ کاری رو انجام ندادن برای مردم، من خودم آخرین دفعه‌ای که رفتم پای صندوق رای در سال 88 بود که دیدم هم تقلب شد هم مردم رو سرکوب کردم و دیگه از اون زمان من pay هیچ صندوق رأی نرفتم. ادامه بدم یا
من ترجمه کنم. When Khatami came to power in 1997, he spoke about the civil society and the capacities of the Iranian constitution. And then he took power, he took the government, and then they also took the parliament. But nothing came out of it. And the last time I voted was in 2009, when there was vote rigging, and since then I have not voted.
حکومت اسلامی که آمد و کشور رو به دست گرفت با این عنوان که میخوان قوانین شریعت رو اجرا کنن. مردم در داخل کشور سرکوب میشن و در خارج کشور با کارهای تروریستی که انجام میدن، در حالی که خود قانون اساسی جمهوری اسلامی رو که نگاه میکنیم در اصل 177 این هست که تمام اصول اسلامی در دست رهبری هست و جمهوری اسلامی ولی فقیه رو که یک نفر با تمام کاراش باید دیگه همه تا ابد انجام بشه و اصلاح طلب ها تمام این گفته هاشون بود که باید مردم مطیع رهبر باشن و هرچی رهبر گفت همونو باید انجام بدن و به مردم دروغ گفتن و مشکلات مردم رو که حل نکردن به مشکلات مردم هم اضافه کردن و مردم رو محدود کردن. اصلاح طلب ها مثل همین ترفندها رو به قول خودشون 2 تا بال نظام هستن، نظام جمهوری اسلامی، و برای حیات خودشون اونها نیاز دارن بنابراین که به این نتیجه رسیدن که با مردم جوری رفتار کنن که جمهوری اسلامی میخواد. پس مردم در حاشیه هستن و من به عنوان یک ایرانی وقتی دیدم این اصلاح طلب ها هم که آمدن روی کار و وعده وعیدایی که دادن عمل نکردن، لذا دیدم جمهوری اسلامی اصلا خودش باید بره و نه اینکه بگم قانون اساسی تغییر کنه یا چیزی مثل آقای خاتمی بیاد برای ما عمل کنه، کاری رو وعده بده که اونم وعده بود به هیچ وعدش عمل نکرد.
The Constitution of the Islamic Republic says that Sharia law should be implemented, and this government has engaged in terrorist acts abroad. And the reformists and the hardliners, they're like the 2 wings of the same bird. And Article 177 of the Islamic Republic Constitution vests complete power in the supreme leader, and it is up to him to decide what is Islamic law and how that operates. And the reformists continually say that we should all obey the supreme leader and do what he says. So saying that nothing has changed, I believe that the entire Islamic Republic must go, not that its constitution should change or any of the changes that Mr. Khatami discusses. The entire system must go.
بفرمایید شما خانم سپهری.
سوال اول رو من همینقدر توضیح دادم.
خیلی سپاسگزارم. The second question is, Mr. Zarif, in previous forums, as was alluded to earlier, said that the Islamic Republic in Iran does not arrest people, does not jail people for their beliefs. It does not arrest or jail people for their political opinions. Yet, Ms. Sepehri, you yourself were imprisoned for your bold activism. Your brother remains in jail, and we saw Navid Afkari arrested and then killed. Why do you think Mr. Zarif says this, and what do you say in response?
خانم سپهری، آقای ظریف در جلسات قبلا داشتی گفته که در ایران کسی به خاطر عقیدهش باورش زندانی نمیشه و این در حالیه که شما خودتون زندانی شدید، برادرتون زندانی هست و نوید افکاری هم میدونیم که اعدام شده. به نظر شما چرا ظریف همچین صحبتی رو میکنه؟
آقای ظریف یک دروغگوی بیشرمی هست که برای توجیه و مالکشی جنایت‌های جمهوری اسلامی هر دروغی رو میگه. به قول آقای پومپئو مالکش اعظم هست. ترفند جمهوری اسلامی این است که مخالفین سیاسی خودش رو سرکوب میکنه، اما به آنها اتهامات امنیتی میزنه و به همین خاطر میگن ما اصلا زندانی سیاسی نداریم و اینها زندانیای امنیتی هستند. ما در سال گذشته طی 2 بیانیه که در گروه‌های 14 نفره خواهان گذار جمهوری اسلامی شدیم، ما را بازداشت کردند. مدت‌ها انفرادی، بازجویی‌های طولانی و بعد در دادگاه‌ها به ما اتهاماتی زدند. اقدام علیه امنیت ملی. آیا درخواست استعفای خامنه‌ای چه اقدامی علیه امنیت ملی بود؟ توهین به رهبری، تبلیغ علیه نظام. کلاً جمهوری اسلامی قوانین خودش رو جوری نوشته که با یک سری اتهامات بسیار مبهم مخالفین سیاسیش رو سرکوب میکنه و بعد هم میگه ما زندانی سیاسی نداریم. ما کسی را به عنوان عقیده‌اش سرکوب نمی کنیم. مثلا زمانی که من به زندان وکیل‌آباد رفتم، بند 5 گفتم قبلا مال بهائیان بوده. بهائی‌ها مدت زیادی اونجا بودن و فقط به خاطر اینکه بهایی بودن زندانی شده بودن. با آنها اتهام جاسوسی و ارتباط با اسرائیل رو زده بودن.
Mr. Zarif is a shameless liar. He's the great apologist for the Islamic Republic, as Mr. Pompeo said. How can asking for the supreme leader to resign could be considered an act against national security? That was my charge, acting against national security, disseminating propaganda against the Islamic Republic. And the Islamic Republic has defined its laws in a way that it can easily suppress its political opponents and throw them in jail. When I was in prison in Ward 5 of the Vakilabad prison, there were several Baha'is in there who were in prison, and these people are only imprisoned because of their beliefs.
سوال بعدی خانم.
بله.
Ms. Seperi, there was today, as we mentioned to you earlier, a forum with Javad Zarif in the United States, in one of the more influential think tanks. What do you say to those people in the West who host Javad Zarif or who host other officials of the Islamic Republic? Do you have a message for them?
خانم سپهری، کمی پیشتر در امروز یکی از اندیشکده‌های های پرنفوذ در آمریکا میزبان جواد ظریف بود. میخواستم بپرسم که شما چه پیامی دارید برای کسانی که از جواد ظریف و دیگر مقامات جمهوری اسلامی میزبانی میکنن در این نشست‌ها؟
رژیم جمهوری اسلامی غیر قانونیه و مردم ایران رو نمایندگی نمیکنه. لذا دلیلی نداره که این انجمن‌ها و گروه‌ها میزبان نماینده‌های رژیم جمهوری اسلامی باشن. بعد مسئولین جمهوری اسلامی سال‌هاست که به انجمن‌ها دعوت میشن و همیشه هم دروغ میگن که همه میدانن. مثلا ظریف رو دعوت میکنن چرا در ایران نقض حقوق بشر صورت میگیره که میگه خاشقچی چی؟ یک جواب بی ربط میده و به این حرفها به شعور مخاطب توهین میکنه. پس چرا به اینها تریبون میدن که بیان فقط دروغ بگن و ما میخوایم اینها رو کاملا بایکوت کنن؟
The Islamic Republic is an illegal regime and it does not represent the Iranian people. Mr. Zarif is a representative of this regime, and he's often offered platforms to speak, and they constantly lie. Why should these institutions offer individuals like him a platform to spread Islamic Republic's propaganda? ببخشید جمله آخرتون میشه دفعه دیگه بگید، من فراموش کردم.
تلفن به اینها ندم، اینا رو بایکوت کنم. چون نماینده ملت ایران نیستن اینا مردم نمایندگی نمی کنن. اینا نماینده های جمهوری اسلامی هستن.
Please do not give them platforms, boycott them because they are not representatives of the Iranian people. They are representing the Islamic Republic, not the Iranian people.
And Shaheen, with your permission, I'll just add one thing. You're doing such an excellent job. It's such a difficult job. One thing that Ms. Sepehri said, a very small insert in the middle of that first part of the response, was when people like Zarif or others are on these foreign, I guess, speaking tours, and they're asked about the violation of human rights in the Islamic Republic, they will often rebut with, what about Khashoggi? As Ms. Sepehri said, this is a totally nonsensical, unrelated response, and they continue to lie. So I just wanted to add.
Oh, sure, sir. Thank you.
سرکار خانم آیا ادامه دارید در این پرسش یا بعدی؟ The last question we have, Ms. Sepehri, in addition to the institutions that host officials of the Islamic Republic, there are many countries that do so. We see this particularly in Europe, where they constantly invite either Mr. Zarif or Mr. Rouhani or other representatives of the Islamic Republic, and not the people. What do you say to them, and how can the free world, how can countries help the people of Iran?
خانم سپهری، غیر از نهادهایی که در کشورهای غربی میزبانی میکنند از مقامات ایرانی، بعضی کشورها، بعضی حکومت‌ها مثلا در اروپا گاهی میزبان آقای ظریف و آقای روحانی هستند. این کشورها و جهان آزاد چطوری میتونن کمک بکنن به مردم ایران؟
ما به رهبران کشورهای خارجی هم میگیم که رژیم جمهوری اسلامی یک رژیم غیر قانونیه که فقط با سرکوب جنایت هست که در داخل ایران تا به حال مونده. ما از رهبران کشورهای غربی به خصوص کشورهای دموکراتیک میخوایم که مقامات جمهوری اسلامی را و به خصوص ناقضان حقوق بشر و اونهایی که مالکشی میکنن روی تحریم، اونها رو تحریم کنن. همچنین خواسته دیگر ما این است که ما میخوایم که کشورهای غربی به خصوص ایالات متحده با سازمانهای اطلاعاتی که دارن از تمام جنایت ها و فساد مالی مقامات جمهوری آگاه هست.
We repeat that the Islamic Republic is an illegal government. We ask European countries, foreign countries, especially particularly democratic countries, to impose sanctions on Islamic Republic officials. And we ask foreign governments, particularly the United States, to publicize the corruption of Iranian officials to publicize the information they have regarding the corruption of Iranian officials.
ما از کشورهای غربی و از دولت‌ها می‌خوایم که اونها را از مردم جدا بدونن و اونها رو به کشورهاشون راه ندن. کشورهای غربی مسئولین جمهوری اسلامی و فرزندانشون رو که پول مردم ایران رو میدزدن و میارن به کشورهای اونها و خوشگذرانی میکنن، اونها رو راه ندن به کشورشون و تحریم کنن.
We want foreign officials to not allow the Iranian officials onto their soil and block them and their children who take money from the Iranian people and steal it. We want them to block them from, stop them from entering their countries and to boycott.
حتی اگر این پولهایی که این میدوزن میارن به کشورشون برای اون کشورها منافع هم داره و برای اونها اقتصادی هست، ولی اجازه ندن که اونها بیان در کشورهای اونها و پول ملت رو خرج کنن و ما ملت ایران مورد ظلم اونها قرار بگیریم.
Even if the money that they bring will benefit economically, provide economic benefits to the countries, we ask them to stop them and do not allow them to go there and bring their money, because we, the Iranian people, are suffering from the Islamic Republic.
مقامات جمهوری اسلامی همواره کشورهای غربی به خصوص کشورهای اروپایی رو تهدید میکنن که ما اگر بریم موج پناهجویان هست که به کشورهای شما میآیند و مواد مخدر میآورند. اجازه میدن که به کشورهای شما بیان. ما اگر بریم خیلی برای شما مصیبت ایجاد میشه و من میخوام بگم که مسئول تمام اینها جمهوری اسلامی هست. چند سال پیش که میلیون ها مردم سوریه مجبور شدن که خانه هاشون رو ترک کنن و آواره شدن و پناهنده شدن به کشورهای اروپایی، مسئولش تمام این اتفاقات جمهوری اسلامی بود در سوریه.
Islamic Republic officials often threaten Europeans by saying that if the Islamic Republic goes, a wave of refugees and drugs will flood European countries. I want to say that if such a thing happens, it is the Islamic Republic's fault. And a few years back, when waves of Syrians went to Europe, that was because of the Islamic Republic and what it had done in Syria.
کشورهای غربی و اروپایی میخوایم که نگذارن که نگران نابودی جمهوری اسلامی نباشن و به بقاش کمک نکنن و بگذارن جمهوری اسلامی نابود بشه.
We ask European officials, foreign officials, to not be worried about the demise of the Islamic Republic and let it go, and that they let it be destroyed.
I did not send you this question before, so I apologize, Ms. Seperi. But I would like to ask: Are you hopeful for the future after the Islamic Republic is gone?
این سوال من قبلا نپرسیدم شما، ولی میخوام از این بپرسم: آیا شما به آینده ایران بعد از جمهوری اسلامی امیدوار هستید؟
انشالله، حتما. دیگه اون اصلا تکرار نخواهد شد. دیگه ملت به یک آگاهی رسیدن که چشم بسته یکی رو انتخاب نکنن.
God willing, sure. Of course, the Iranian nation have reached awareness so that they just won't blindly pick somebody.
I would like, in closing, just to comment how many comments we're receiving, both in this Zoom, on social media. So many people are thanking her immensely for her bravery, for saying these things from inside Iran, that still Iranians outside of the country, when they're safe, don't have the bravery and the audacity to say. Yes.
میخوام بگم که خیلی همین حالا هم در زوم هم در شبکه‌های اجتماعی افراد زیادی دارن کامنت میذارن و من میخواستم تشکر کنم از شما که از داخل ایران با شجاعت این صحبت‌ها رو میکنید.
خواهش میکنم. ممنونم از شما.
خانم سپهری،
وقت شما بخیر.
وقت شما بخیر. خیلی ها کامنت میذارن، همونطوری که چند روز پیش خدمتتون عرض کردم که در واقع یه جوکی شده بین خیلی از ما، یه شوخی جا افتاده که هر وقت شما توی تلویزیون و یا مصاحبه ها تشریف دارین، به غیر از این که بیان بگن آیا خانم سپهری رو دیدید، خیلی هم میگن که راستی آیا شیرزن رو دیدی امشب تو تلویزیون، و واقعا برای ما شیرزن هستید و میخوام تو بدن دست شما. اگر چیزی داری در آخر برنامه که به دوستا بگید، به هر کسی هر چیزی میخواید بگید، بفرمایید شما.
من از جامعه جهانی باز دوباره تکرار میکنم، از کنشگران سیاسی، از وکلا، از تمام کسانی که در خارج از کشور و داخل کشور هستن با ما همراه بشن بدون خشونت تا از این جمهوری اسلامی عبور کنیم. 42 سال وقت گرفتن از ما، عمر ما، جوانی ما، همه زندگیمون از ما گرفتن. دیگه بعد 42 سال همه رو خسته کردن، همه رو ناامید کردن. میخوام که همه همراه بشن با ما تا ما از جمهوری اسلامی بدون خشونت عبور کنیم.
I ask all the activists and the international community and also people inside Iran to help us to get over the Islamic Republic without violence. We are tired. They've been in power for 42 years. And it's time for them to go without engaging in violence.
Friends, before we close today's event, we'll just thank Ms. Sepehri briefly in Persian. Shaheen, if you want to thank her personally, go ahead, and then we'll close it.
خانم سپهری، من شخصا خودم امروز مترجم، ولی من خیلی خوشحالم که شما امروز صحبت کردم باهاتون و همه به شما افتخار میکنن که شما و همرزمانتون که اینقدر با شجاعت از داخل ایران در واقع پرچم آزادیخواهی بلند کردید و واقعا امیدوارم که روز در ایران آزاد شما رو ببینید.
امیدوارم که شما هم به روزی برسه که همه با هم در ایران باشیم و ایران آزاد داشته باشیم و جشن بگیریم و خوشحال باشیم انشاءالله. ممنونم از شما و باز هم تکرار میکنم که اروپاییان، کشورهای غربی، همه با هم، ایالات متحده، همه با ما همراه بشن تا ما بدون خشونت از جمهوری اسلامی عبور کنیم.
خیلی خیلی سپاسگزاریم از شما سرکار خانم. منم همونطوری که شاهین جان فرمودن، منم بسیار بسیار امیدوار هستم که یه روز ندور ندیر شما رو در ایران خواهیم دید. به قول شما یه جشن بزرگ بی‌نظیر خواهیم گرفت به افتخار شما، به افتخار کسای دیگه که شب و روز تلاش میکنن برای آزادی، برای نجات کشور و شخصا خیلی از شما سپاسگزاری میکنم. خدا نگهدارتون باشه و واقعا زنده و پاینده باشید.
ممنونم.
In her closing remarks, Ms. Sepehri thanked everyone, and she also reiterated that the Europeans, the United States, the free world must unite to help the Iranian people to proceed on from the Islamic Republic to a secular democracy peacefully, without violence. She said now's the time, and she looks forward to seeing everyone in a free Iran and to celebrating all together. And now I would like to thank everyone again for attending today. I know we had some technical problems, but given the circumstances, I'm sure you can understand. We're all so thankful for Ms. Sepehri's presence. Thank you to you, Shaheen, as well, for your, again, nonstop advocacy on behalf of the Iranian people. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for those who joined this event, and thank you for hearing the voice and the voices of the Iranian people, and not just their murderers who are so frequently given platforms and tribunes in the West. And one day I look forward to when Ms. Sepehri and so many other advocates for a free Iran are on the stage at the Council on Foreign Relations, and all of the other prestigious think tanks and stages across the world. And I know that that day is not far away. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you at an event down the road.